Hi, this is Alex, and if you love music, well, you've come to the right place because we're all about albums. At one time or another, we have all heard instrumental music, from classical concerts to jazz music, even to movies, television shows, and even being on hold. Hearing well-written instrumentals, which can be from a jingle to a TV commercial, a TV theme song, or a movie theme song, these help capture our imagination and help us remember the product a lot more vividly, such as the introduction to Star Wars. So what happens when talented musicians in the music industry turn their intentions to instrumental music? Some would call this atmospheric music. Now, although some pop bands, rock bands will occasionally have an album of a lot of instrumentals, this is not what they're known for. And then we have those artists who were in bands who wrote original music and sang, and they never quite made it. And yet, when they turned their attention to instrumentals, they then became successful. A current example is Siddhartha Khosla. Now, who is this gentleman? Well, he was a musician originally in a band, and they had Indian roots, and this music never got them the attention that they deserved. And of course, this frustrates musicians as they cannot get their message music out there. And yet, he became extremely successful. You know him well from the TV show on the Hulu streaming platform of Only Murders in the Building. Yes, he not only wrote the theme song, he composes all the soundtrack for the show. This instrumental music helps direct us into where we should pay attention. Also, it could signify that there's a stressful moment or a funny moment or something mysterious is about to happen. So you can say really that the music that Siddhartha uses for his show influences our reaction, our mood, and how we pay attention to each individual character. Many times these musicians are what help make or break a movie or a TV series. We should also consider John Williams, a very well-known composer, best known for the music he has done for many, many blockbuster movies. Here is a CD that has highlights from multiple movies that he composed for, and these would include Home Alone and E.T. the Extraterrestrial, as well as Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the biggest box office bonanza of Star Wars. What's great about his music is with just a few notes, you can identify what film that the music goes to. John Williams helped to sell these films, make them successful, and it burns in your mind the tunes which are very, very tightly associated with these movies. So what happens when instrumental music is the only thing that the artist actually works on and composes? Well, one such genre developed called New Age music, and it is a type of atmospheric or mood music. This started in the 1960s and continued on and became much more successful in the 1970s and even into the 1980s. These New Age artists would include Michael Hedges, William Ackerman, George Winston, and Alex DeGrassi, amongst many others. All these artists appeared on the 1970s label Windham Hill Records, and this label is very tightly associated with New Age music. But beyond New Age music, we have many contemporary artists who are creating very interesting soundscapes, much more than music that would be in the background. This music deserves your attention. And a little later in the video, I will give you a list of many contemporary artists who have put out some very fine instrumental albums. So if you want to find some really great records to add to your collection, you got to stick around for those a little later in the video. And who knows, one of these albums may become one of your new favorite albums. So I'm not talking about jazz or classical music, which occasionally has some singers, but by and large is instrumentals. What I am going to talk about are those artists who are in the rock and folk and even pop genres that will make you want to sit up and listen, even though they say nothing. The earliest great instrumental rock band was the Ventures. They had surf music, and they had a huge hit in 1960 entitled Walk, Don't Run. Now, this song really was the starting point of instrumental rock, which developed from there. Well, what about the famous TV theme songs? Well, the Hawaii Five-0 theme song was composed in 1968 by Morton Stevens, and this tune was also recorded by, once again, the Ventures, and this became a hit for them, and it reached number 4 in the Billboard Hot 100 list. The theme song for Hawaii Five-0 is considered one of the most memorable and best written instrumentals ever. And what about Lalo Schifrin? Who is he? Well, he's an Argentinian composer, and he wrote the theme for Mission Impossible. This is also one of the great theme songs. Everybody knows what we're talking about, whether it's the Tom Cruise movie blockbusters of Mission Impossible or the original TV series that ran from 1966 to 1973. When we hear that instrumental, we immediately know what it's referring to. After the Ventures, we have some other important rock instrumental albums. I'm going to talk about 2 very important and well-known instrumental albums. And the first one I'm going to talk about is that 1973 classic instrumental album by the great Mike Oldfield, who was only, believe it or not, 19 years old when the album was recorded and came out. And it is none other than the album Tubular Bells. This iconic album cover, it should be recognizable to just about anybody. And believe it or not, this is the first album to have the Virgin record label. They were hopeful that this album would sell, but it really did not do that well when it was released in May of 1973. However, the album hit the big time in December of 1973, where the album was used as the opening theme to the horror classic film, The Exorcist. Yes, everybody who wanted to get scared, that was the movie to see. And once you heard Tubular Bells, you were transported back to that really creepy early horror classic. And who would figure an instrumental rock album, once it was associated with a movie, it reached, believe it or not, number 3 on the US charts later that year. And the album ended up selling, wait for it, 15 million copies worldwide. So I think the album did pretty good for an all-instrumental album. The other slightly lesser-known album to come out also, believe it or not, in 1973 was the progressive rock keyboardist Rick Wakeman, who released the album The 6 Wives of Henry VIII. Now, a couple of interesting points. First off, the album, yes, contains 6 songs, 3 on each side. Each is a theme related to one of the wives of Henry VIII. Now, originally, Rick had written a seventh tune, which was for Henry VIII himself. However, due to space limitations on the vinyl, back then there were no CDs, the album only contained the six wives, and the Henry's theme was not put on the original album. However, it could be heard later on when Rick Wakeman did perform the album in its entirety many years later. Although it did not do as well as Tubular Bells early on, it did reach number 30 on the US charts and number 7 in the UK. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Rick Wakeman, he was the keyboardist on several important early albums for the rock band Yes. And yes, he was on the album Fragile, and he actually elevated that album to a different level with a lot of the input and basically his genius came through and made that album great. What's interesting about this album, which appears on the A&M label, was that the music executives, they were waiting for the vocals to be written for the album, and when they found out there weren't going to be any vocals, they really were upset. They predicted that maybe the album would sell 50,000 copies, which really depressed Rick Wakeman. However, of course, they were wrong, and guess what? It sold during its span to the present day, as did Tubular Bells, 15 million copies. So their A&M Records, an instrumental album, was another great success. For those of you who haven't heard Tubular Bells or The Six Wives of Henry VIII, I really urge you to listen to it. You really need to pay attention. You want to listen at night. You want to even listen with your eyes closed, but it will be a great experience for you, up there with Dark Side of the Moon experience, which many of you can remember from days of past. And finally, I'm just going to squeeze in a third one here, and I'm just going to mention them for a second. And that is the progressive rock band from the 70s, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Now, you're going to say, wait, Alex, they sang on almost all their songs except maybe Pictures at an Exhibition, which was, of course, a classical piece that they reinterpreted. However, I would consider ELP a instrumental band because if you think about it, they had very simple lyrics. The lyrics were repetitive and they were just there to emphasize the theme. And you can just pick almost any of their albums. Here's Trilogy, one of their early solo works. And again, it's mostly instrumental, but yes, there is singing. So they're kind of like, they made it onto this video. But many of you would say they really don't deserve a spot. I'm not going to argue with you. I just thought I would mention them. Next up is the appearance of New Age music. Now, in the mid-19 to late 1960s, there was some music that was developed for inspiration and especially for meditation, as meditation became a part of the 1960 culture. In 1964, there was an album entitled Music for Meditation. And this album is by Tony Scott, and this is credited to be the first New Age album. Now, New Age artists started popping up in the mid to late 1970s and extended into the 80s and beyond. And these New Age artists, most of them were on the record label Windham Hill, which I had mentioned earlier. And actually, in one of my earlier videos when I talked about good quality recordings, Windham Hill in the 70s and 80s typically had very excellent sound quality to their recordings. Two of the artists in this genre actually are quite important to me, as they make up part of my life, basically in my 20s, when I was studying and I had some friends over for drinks or whatnot, I usually put on a couple of New Age albums. And the two that I put on all the time and I loved, and I really got to know these albums really well. And I obviously there's no words to sing, but these albums really did set a mood. The first of these albums is by George Winston, and it's written here, but it blends into the background. It's called December. And just like the title, when you hear the music, you identify with winter and the holidays. It's just remarkable the mood this album puts you in. And that's George Winston. He has a lot of great albums, but my favorite of all is December. It's really worth a listen. The other album that was important to me was by the artist Andreas Vollenweider, and he put out an album of instrumental music where he's a multi-instrumentalist, but really the harp is what is really featured strongly on the album. The album, which came out in 1981. This one is not on the Windham Hill label, but nonetheless, this album is entitled Behind the Gardens, Behind the Wall, Under the Tree. And a great, great instrumental album. Not only was this a good album, the folks later on at the Grammys in, I believe, 1987 was the first Grammy which came out to be awarded specifically to New Age music. So Andreas Vollenweider in 1987 went on to win the first Grammy Award in the category of Best Recordings New Age Music, and that was the album entitled Down to the Moon. And one of the reasons I love these albums both was I could play them when I was studying, so it would lighten the tension of the studying, but also it was contemplative to listen to the albums at the end of a long day in classes and studying. You just want to wind down, you want to get your mind clear, and these two albums really did do the trick. And as I mentioned, Windham Hill put out a lot of New Age albums. And here is actually a sampler that came out, which has many of the artists. Here they are. We have Michael Hedges. We have here Mike Isham, William Ackerman, George Winston, a band called Shadow Fax, Alex DeGrassi, who I mentioned, and a few others on this album. And this sampler is quite representative of what New Age music to Windham Hill is all about. And by the way, one of the artists, William Ackerman, is actually the founder of Windham Hill Records. Okay, I know. You're saying, Alex, come on, let's get to somebody new. You're talking still in the 1980s. All right, so we'll come to the 2000s, and here are some of the contemporary artists that I love to listen to. And these are some albums that are pretty easy to find, both if you want vinyl, and many of them also are on CD. And of course, you can stream them as well. But these are albums I highly, highly recommend. So let's get started. First up is Bill Frisell. So who is Bill Frisell? Well, he is a very talented guitarist who can play any genre out there. He is known for jazz music, but he also does a lot of other recordings, including folk music and Americana, and I'll show you a couple of those albums in a second. He went to the Berklee School of Music, and he was a contemporary there with the great jazz guitarist Pat Metheny. Small world, right? Two guys, similar paths, but they kind of diverged a bit. Now, Bill Frisell is highly, highly sought after. He's been in well over 100 recordings, either him as the primary member or just as a studio musician or coming in as a friend. I'm going to mention two recent albums that he's done, which are quite excellent. First is the 2018 album Music Is. And this is just wonderful, and it shows his great musicianship. And the music itself is great too. Not only can he play, I mean, it's good music. And the other one is an album dear to me. It came out a couple years later in 2020, and that is the album entitled Americana. And that's exactly what he does. He interprets some known Americana songs, and the interpretations are quite good. And again, he has a top band with him. They're all excellent musicians, and the recordings are extraordinary. So if you're an audiophile and you want some great recordings, anything with Bill Frisell on it as the leader, you're bound to get not only great music, but great sounding music as well. Next up, we have another very talented guitarist, and this album came out just recently in 2025, I think about a month ago maybe, and that is Steve Gunn. That's spelled Gunn for those of you interested, and this is his album Daylight Daylight. I really love this album. This album appears on the No Quarter label, which is a pretty good label. The sound quality is good on this album, and he's done many albums prior to this, and they all have similar themes. But this one I really love. It's just the right mood to get you to relax, and you can just read books, or on the other hand, really focus in on the music that he has put in front of you, because it is just, how should I say, very layered, his music, and you really gotta pull, the onion skin off to really appreciate everything he's doing on this album. Next up, another fabulous guitarist, probably my favorite as far as instrumentals go, and that is James Elkington. And some of his albums feature with him as a duo, Nathan Salzberg. Now, who's Nathan Salzberg? Well, if you have followed me, you know one of my favorite Americana singers and writers is a woman named Joan Shelley. And Nathan Salzberg appears on every one of her albums, and the acoustic guitar work is sensational. And guess what? You know why he's there? They're married. Okay. Now, the two albums that I will mention that they did together, one was, I believe, from 2015, entitled Am's Case, and the other one came out more recently, I believe in 2024, entitled August. Both of these albums appear on a label called Paradise of Bachelors, which I never heard of it up until these two albums, but I love that title for the record label. I'm going to close with two more artists that I think deserve your attention. The first is a brother duo. They're called Hermanos Gutierrez. They're Ecuadorian slash Swiss, good combination. And these brothers put out in 2024 a sensational guitar-themed record entitled El Bueno y El Malo, which means the good and the bad. And yes, you guessed it, it's sort of a take on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the theme is very Western. So it's sort of like a soundtrack to a spaghetti Western from days of yore, from the 1960s and 70s. A music critic described them as following, I'll read it: the two brothers duel across evocative guitar-laden landscapes. And I think that's atmosphere, that feeling that they put out there is great. And they did recently collaborate with Jack Johnson, have a single with them playing the instrumental, but yeah, Jack Johnson is singing. But you see, they're sought after, they're well known, and people want to record songs or albums with them. And finally, we have another all-instrumental band called North Americans, and they released an album in 2020 entitled Roped In, and I kind of a little bit of a psychedelic type album cover. It's kind of cool, and they kind of continue the theme in the back. And what's interesting here is the little obi here is written, and this is how this This is how they describe this band. They are pedal steel, nylon string guitar intertwined to create ethereal, crystalline drones and twinkling hypnotic moods. I do believe those words are actually very accurate to what you would hear on this record. They do have several other records. They're all quite good. It is a very folk Americana sounding album, as you would guess from their band name, North Americans. Anyway, those are several albums that I really think you should check out. They're wonderful records. I think the important notice here is don't skip over all instrumental albums. You're really, really missing out on some quality music, great musicianship. And a lot of these albums, since there's no vocals or anything, you can really hear the richness of the instruments. You can appreciate the musicianship a lot more. And just for that, I recommend all those albums. As always, if you have any other instrumental albums that I didn't mention, you want me to mention or know about, please let me know on the comment sections below. And now for last video's unknown album. The unknown album was a 1978 album cover by none other than the great and late Lowell George. Now, who's Lowell George? He is the singer for the great live band Little Feat. Little Feat had some FM hits, and they're best known for their album Waiting for Columbus, a double live album, and it's well recorded. You really get that feeling of liveness to the album. And Little Feat, I guess, reflect Lowell George. It has a very Louisiana, Cajun style feeling to the music. And although I didn't mention the album title, this album is entitled by Lowell George, his only solo album, Thanks, I'll Eat It Here. And now for this video's unknown album. Great. Hope you got that one. If you think you know the answers, let me know on the comment sections below, and I'll let you know how you did. As always, this is Alex with All About Albums. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. And remember, keep them spinning.